The Committee on Veterans Affairs calls this oversight hearing to order. It is now 6 p.m. on Thursday, May 12, 2016. Present with me this evening, to my left, Senator Tommy Morrison, to his left, Senator Frank Blas, and to his left, Senator Anthony Etta, and to my right is Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. The purpose of the oversight hearing tonight is to discuss the status of Guam's Veterans Affairs Office staffing issues. And let me just get through this preliminaries here that we have to go through, and then we'll get into more details. Notice of this oversight hearing was provided to senators, stakeholders, and the local media on May 5th, giving a 5-day notice, and on May 10th, 2016, giving a 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements of the open government law. This oversight hearing is also being broadcast on local television, so for those who will be presenting testimony tonight, I'm going to ask that you make sure that you speak into the mic so that those who are listening at home will be able to hear. We are also recording this session. Now, this oversight hearing, I noticed that some people have signed up, and the way I'm going to handle this is that since this is an oversight hearing on the Veterans Affairs Office, with a specific focus on the staffing challenges that the office has, I will focus on that topic first, and then after that is discussed, I will then open it up for those who have signed up, who may be willing to or may want to provide further testimony on the issue. Now, we all know that, of course, the Veterans Affairs Office provides very important services to our veterans, to include assistance with preparing benefit claims, assistance in clearing red tape so vets and spouses can access their benefits on base, and also to conduct burial services. Under the current Executive Director, Mr. Martin Manglona, I want to say, without any reservation, that I think there has been significant improvement in the services down at the Veterans Affairs Office, at the office and at the cemetery. So I think that certainly needs to be recognized. Now, those improvements, of course, can only be attributed to good management and leadership, and with the help of a good staff. And the latter is what we're going to focus on, the staff. Now, the reason for the oversight is to get a better understanding of the reasons why the Veterans Affairs Office is having to struggle to get personnel hired to meet its staffing needs, and to the level of compensation necessary to retain the employees. So, insofar as the challenges that the Veterans Affairs Office is having, based on information that I've been able to gather from the Department of Administration and from the Veterans Affairs Office, the committee has found facts such as with respect to the lengthy hiring process, there are individuals who have been working at the Veterans Affairs Office, and when I say Veterans Affairs Office, that includes the cemetery, who from start to finish, from the time that they showed up to say, I'm here to report for work, to the time that they get their first paycheck, that has ranged from anywhere from 101 days to 336 days before that individual got his first paycheck. And we just have to ask the question, why? And to that, Department of Administration will be here tonight to address some of these issues. The Veterans Affairs Office transmitted to the Department of Administration its request, I guess we all know it as the GG1, for recruitment. And when it transmitted that, it transmitted it requesting to hire certain personnel at certain positions. And Department of Administration, ultimately, these individuals, when the processing got completed, the level that they were ultimately hired in was a lot lower. And we got to ask the question again, why? And I'm expecting that DOA, who's here tonight, will be able to respond to that. And then, of course, was this when a request comes in for a position to hire a person at a certain position, and then they get hired ultimately at a lower position, is that a unilateral decision on the part of the Department of Administration? Or do they bring in the agency and say, here is why we cannot hire at that level? And then finally, to the question of retroactive pay. So, based on the information that I got, all the 7 personnel who are in question have now been hired, as recent as May 10th. So all these people finally are officially on board and either has received their first check or will be receiving it the next pay period. Now, at this point, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go ahead and, based on the information that I've received, I'm going to go ahead and ask Department of Administration, HR Division, to come forward and respond to the questions that I have. And then after they've finished, I'm going to ask Mr. Manglotnya to then come up and see if there's any things that he wants to add or that I might have missed that then he may want to contribute to the discussion. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and ask the Department of Administration to please step forward to the table. I also want to recognize the presence of Senator Frank Uggan, who has joined us this evening. Thank you. So for the record, please identify yourself and the gentleman that's with you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Christine Belletti, the Director of Department of Administration.
Okay. Can you reposition those mics, please?
Oh, good afternoon. My name is Shane Nata, Human Resources Administrator for DOA.
Okay. So let me start off by putting out just what we have found based on the information. One is that the average time between when an employee arrives at the Veterans Affairs Office to report for duty and the time that the Veterans Affairs Office issues the GG1 and transmits it on to BBMR so that the processing can begin has averaged about 88 days. So the guy shows up for work, we give him a tool to work with, but it takes 88 days on average before that GG1 is transmitted on to BBMR and to the Department of Administration. With the exception of one individual who took 247 days, was actually started working in January of 2015, and the GG1 did not finally go out until 247 days later. So that was kind of an outlier, and I did not include that in the average, but on the average it took 88 days to issue out the GG1s. And this accounts for 85% of the total elapsed days. This is just work days, not including holidays and weekends. The average time from the time that BBMR receives the GG1 to the time that it makes its way to the Department of Administration which ultimately culminates in the personnel action that says you are now an official employee of the government of Guam, averages about 20 days. That's about four weeks from Monday through Friday only. And that accounts for 15% of the elapsed time from the time that the individual arrives. So the good news is that all 7 employees in question are now officially hired, albeit at lower grades. So given that information, I basically have 2 questions. One is, and maybe this one question is, I'll have to wait I'll have to ask Mr. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Manglonia to step forward and join at the table. Because the one question that I have is really can only be answered by you. Although this individual had been down at the Veterans Affairs office since January of 2015, it wasn't until 247 days later that a GG1 was transmitted from the Veterans Affairs office. So the question, of course, then that's burning bright is, did the individual ever come up and say, when am I going to get paid? Or was somebody paying him out of pocket? But a whole year went by and a check was never issued for the guy.
Let me, Senator, let me just give you a background of what's the problem. First of all, when Governor Cole asked me to take over, I must apologize. I had a stroke last month and I can't hardly talk. Sometimes I had to struggle. But when I came on board, the individual I have, this administrative officer, administrative assistant, I have a lot of problem. Very incompetent. I just don't understand how long she's been working there for so many years. When I hired somebody, I told her to do the GG1, and I thought that was done. Evidently, in cases, I asked her, she informed me that it's been processed. Of all the individuals I interviewed, to me, they're qualified, and I follow the law. But in cases that, when I got a response from DOA, they gave me additional requirement, which I'm not aware. Not only that,
I want to stay on point. Okay. How does an individual work at the Veterans Affairs office, and this individual was working as a cemetery worker for a whole year, and because he hadn't been officially hired, he wasn't getting a paycheck? Then a red flag ever come up? And this was before your time. He was there before your time, but he was also there up until today.
There's nobody that works there that did not get paid since last year. There's one incident by the name of one individual that was working there before I came. He was being terminated because he has problem with the law. But all the individuals that I have at the cemetery, they're getting paid, except this 3 individuals that I hired in December.
Well, this one individual was down at the Veterans Affairs office. He was working for the cemetery since January 12, 2015, and he ultimately, paperwork, finally, he worked through all that time. Finally, on May 5th, he got the personnel action that picked him up.
Must be 2016, not 2015. I have the individual that you're referring to here, but he's being paid. Could you give me the name? And I got the G1 here.
The name is Kenneth Angoko.
Angoko? Angoko started in December 2015.
Okay. So then the GG1 form that was provided to me by your office then had that typo.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll drill down on that later. But now the question to the Department of Administration is, can retroactive pay be given to these individuals who were on board for weeks but were not officially picked up until just some as recent as just yesterday?
Unfortunately, no, Senator.
Okay.
It's against the law. We need to have GG1s properly processed in order for an individual to be deemed an employee of the government. Absent that, we cannot pay them or cause them to work until they've officially been processed.
Okay. Sure. All right. Okay. Go ahead.
Maybe you can just clarify. It's been a while, admittedly, since I've been over here, but still, can someone even be on the job without a GG1 having been processed?
You're not supposed to. Yeah. It's not legally permissible.
So regardless of whether or not a director or anyone wants to pick up somebody, I want to start you today, you're not going to, until your GG1 is cut and processed through BBMR and DOA, you should not start working because
That's
there's no
correct.
guarantee that you're going to be getting any payment.
That's correct. And even with the GG1 Vice Speaker, they still need to go through the process of turning in their police clearance, their court clearance, taking the drug test, and then we have to get the results of the drug test before an official employment offer can be made.
Could I say something, Speaker? Vice Speaker? That's not actually true. I got hired on April. I got paid on September, last part of September. Since April, I started working at that office. The government put me down there to work because we don't have anybody, and I never get paid till September. So that's not true.
I understand that there's been, but I'm just saying, no one should be working
That's correct.
until the green GG1 comes and says, you're hired. Because I may want somebody, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cleared. I don't understand how anybody could be given a shovel or given a computer or given keys to an office that hasn't been cleared through the process before their first day.
I understand what you're saying. Let me give you an example. This 3 cemetery workers. I approached the governor. I have 2 individual cemetery. Sometimes I got 3 burial a day. I have back to back. There's no way 2 people to bury 3 people a day. So I asked the governor if I could hire, and he allowed me to do that. And as a matter of fact, we had a meeting with the governor, and he even asked Bernie or Tara to come in. And Bernie said, I will do whatever it takes, Governor. That's the way it would work. There's no way I'm going to do my job if I don't have personnel. You could be very pragmatic, but it's not actually what's happening. What I'm going to do if the dead body comes down at the cemetery, what do you want me to do? Turn him back?
Of course, the answer is no. That burial is going to go through. But the
So
point-
if we follow the law, how could I accomplish a mission? We have to use good common sense.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Mayoga, in terms of meeting the personnel. But if you're not able to process that individual or bring that individual on board officially, then that's where we become resourceful and we call the governor's office and say, can you spare 3 individuals for at least the next 30 days? Or go to an agency through the governor's office and say, can you spare 3 individuals? Because that's what I need to do about these 2 individuals or 3 individuals in the process. That's where the question, the line of statement is being made that no one should officially be brought on board until the BMI processes and clears that particular GG1 gets to DOA, they go through the drug test, they go through all, filling out the application, and then it's signed off once it comes to the doctor to receive. But you experience something different.
But why does it take 780 days? That's what I'm saying. I submitted GG1 in December. Up until now, these people just got paid last week.
Mr. Manglonia, just based on the documents that I looked at, you've got two individuals that came on board December 2nd. It took 68 days for the certifying officer. It was either the administrative officer who has now left. It took 65 days to certify that thing, and then another total of 68 days before it finally went out the door. So, on the one hand, yes, the mission, we got to continue on and accomplish that mission, but somebody in the rear is not doing their work.
Give me the names, Senator.
Okay, so Nicholas and Ngoko, for example, they started on December 2nd, 2015. BBMR did not receive those GG1s until 68 days later on March 14th, 2016.
That's incorrect. I got receipt date December 10, 2015, right here.
Hey, I'm just going off of the documents that you provided me.
No, BBMR received it in December 10, 2015. And why does it take that long? I don't know.
And admittedly, the BBMR, I'm not trying to defend the administration, I assure you, but if you filed for it, if you submitted it on December the 2nd, BBMR got it on December the 10th. Even if the BBMR got it on December the 10th, I still contend they could not have started with you until BBMR clears it, then sends it to DOA, DOA clears it, and then they can start. I understand that you want to have it done, you have a mission that you have to meet immediately, but you're going to have to deal with the administration with that, and I think we've got to figure out, one, why it's taking so long to get out of your office, or even worse yet, why it arrived at BBMR on December the 10th, and didn't get to DOA until March the 28th.
Correct.
Well, let me. So I have here two GG1 forms. One that was, it was not even dated by the certifying officer. She's gone now, but she signed it, and it has a stamp here showing that BBMR received it on December 10th. On the same individual, another GG1 was certified by yourself on March 8th and shows a stamp that it was received at BBMR on March 14th, and this document has the signature of the BBMR director with a date of March 22nd. The first one that was received on December 10th does not have the BBMR director's signature. The point is that it would seem to me that if after one pay period has gone by, maybe two pay periods, boy, somebody should be bouncing off that wall.
I did. That's why I went to city governor. You just don't understand my problem there. I have an individual that is...
And that individual is gone. Fine.
That's right.
Fine. But then even after she had left, then it wasn't until March 8th that you actually then certified that for both individuals, for Mr. Sanicolas and Mr. Ngoko. So the point that I'm trying to make is that there's this long processing time, but 88% of that was because it never went out the door of the Veterans Affairs Office. Now, it's water under the bridge, okay? And the point is that I think we've been able to identify that it was in-house where the delay was because they were averaging 20 days to get that processed. Okay? Now, that's we're not going to change, we're not going to turn back the clock. I just want to point that out, that the long delay was in-house. Now, I think the next important question that we need to get to, unless any of my colleagues have any questions on this particularly long delay, but the other questions that I think now need to be asked is, I know that you, in these GG1s, you had sent over, and let's take the cemetery workers. You had sent over the GG1s for these individuals to get hired as cemetery workers. Ultimately, when it got over to DOA, the DOA says, no, they're not qualified for that. They need a chauffeur's license, but we can hire them as laborers. So maybe Department of Administration can help us to understand what went on here. Now, all these recruitment requests went to DOA under the LTA provision. So maybe you can help us understand, what is this LTA provision versus a regular hiring?
The limited term appointment is basically a temporary appointment for up to a year where an individual occupies a classified position temporarily while the department or agency prepares the paperwork to basically officially announce the position. Even though the person may be hired under an LTA appointment, it does not necessarily mean that they would qualify or they would get the position once advertised. It would still need to go through the merit process, which is officially announcing it, receiving applications, ratings, and that kind of thing.
But under the LTA provision, does he have to compete with other?
No, they do not have to compete. The agency director can make the decision as to who's hired, but they would have to be brought in at a step one.
Okay. Now, in the case of the cemetery workers, 3 of them, the GG1, the recruitment requests came in to hire them as cemetery workers at step 1.
Correct.
Okay. Can you maybe explain why ultimately they got hired at a lower level?
Even though it's the director that identifies the person that wants to be hired, they still have to meet the minimum qualifications of the position. Unfortunately, with the individuals that the names were submitted, they did not qualify under the minimum qualifications, so therefore we could not process the GG1 with those individuals.
Is it possible? Now, there's some subjectiveness to the evaluation as to whether they meet the qualifications, right? The minimum qualifications. Is there some degree of subjectiveness there?
There is. It doesn't necessarily need to be specific to those requirements, but in the listing of responsibilities or duties, that's how they rate whether there's some kind of experience in their background that would qualify as meeting it.
Would you agree that maybe some people just do not have that ability to be able to adequately write, and communicate that here's my work background, here are my experiences. And so the individual that does not have that gift of writing will probably have a difficult time communicating that he has the qualifications, correct?
That's correct. And also, if they don't put all of their skills, that's why I would recommend for anyone that's filling out application to look through the knowledge of, the knowledge, abilities, and skills. So in the case of the cemetery worker, when it says knowledge of landscaping, including methods of soil preservation, they may have had experience in the past but not listed it. And so we can't rate and qualify the person if they don't list all the skills and abilities that meet this position's requirements.
So then the question that I would have to ask is, if we accept the fact that there are some people that do not write well enough to be able to communicate all that, would this individual be able to come back and resubmit his application form with the assistance of somebody sitting down to help him write out that job description? I'm not saying that he's going to sit down and fabricate anything. Will he can he get a second chance at it?
But they can resubmit, yeah.
And I think for the veterans, you all are very familiar with that. How many times have we put in a claims benefit, but we just don't have that penchant for writing, right? And you find somebody who knows how to dot the I's and cross the T's. So then to my question, if this individual was found not to be qualified because he did not communicate well enough, will he have a second shot at that?
Basically, we'll take the application in as they submit it. How they get about articulating their experiences is really up to them. If they did have, a lot of times we have cousins, nieces, and nephews that can probably articulate things better than we can, right? And so if they did seek that assistance outside of our office and turned in an application, we would basically evaluate it from what's there. There's nothing stopping the director from turning in a subsequent application.
Okay, so the situation can be corrected, correct?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
There's the other part to the cemetery workers. There's the special qualification requirement that he must have a chauffeur's license. Now, when I looked on the in the Guam GCA, you look at the one section and it defines what a chauffeur is. A chauffeur is somebody who drives a vehicle to transport people for compensation, and that individual has to then get a chauffeur's license. I'm not sure why it would need an individual would need a chauffeur's license, but be that as it may, the fact remains is that in the job description it says you must have a chauffeur's license. Now, is there anything that the director can do to change that? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and typically with the positions, if let's say the chauffeur's license was a need back in 2010 when it was amended, then it would have gone through that way with that administration as far as how it's done. But it's been 6 years since then, so if things have changed in the operations of the veteran cemetery that it no longer requires that, then there's nothing stopping the department from requesting us to take it out based on what they provide us, saying we no longer need it. Yeah.
Now, as I understand it, in the job description, it says that he must be able to operate a backhoe, a dump truck, some other kind of tractor, I guess, or whatever. I think the heaviest equipment they got down there is the golf cart, which is used to haul around equipment. So, again, if that requirement is making it not possible for these guys to be able to qualify for a cemetery worker, then that can be rectified.
Yes, as long as there's...
With the director coming in saying, we don't need that. Now, is this a double-edged sword, though? We come in and say, the applicants do not need a chauffeur's license. Is there any possible downside to that?
Well, I think what needs to happen is the department needs to identify what are the skills necessary or what is the minimum qualifications. In this case, from what I understand, a chauffeur's license is a prerequisite for the certification for the backhoe, dump truck, tractors, mowers. If that's not currently available there or they're not even using it, then the department should petition to change the position as well as, or maybe not the position description, but certainly the minimum qualifications and experience, and take out items in here that are no longer applicable.
Right, because as I understand it, based on my meeting with Mr. Manglonia, when they need to dig for an in-ground burial, they basically contract for a backhoe to come in.
Right.
They don't have any dump trucks, and I think the only thing that moves on wheels is the lift that picks up the casket to put into the crypt, and like I said, I believe just the golf cart.
Right.
So
I understand, Mr. Chairman. The position descriptions and the qualifications are provided by the department. This particular one was just last updated May 2010. So again, as you're saying, it may not be applicable, and it would just need to go through the process of change.
So we can so this can be rectified, right? And I
Correct.
guess that's important because the salary difference between a cemetery worker is about $7,000. A cemetery worker, entry level, which is what they were being requested to be hired for, comes in at $26,500. They were ultimately hired at grade D1 at $19,000. Now, okay, so I think we can make headway on this. Now, I know that you had voiced dissatisfaction with the fact that you went in asking to hire these guys as cemetery workers. They came out as laborers. So, I guess I understand that DOA basically says, look, we can't hire at this, but you can hire at this. But was that a unilateral decision on the part of DOA?
No.
Or was there somebody from the Veterans Affairs Office that said, okay, we'll take that?
Not within the Veterans Affairs Department, but with our Chief of Staff, Mark Calvo, who oversees the Veterans Affairs. The idea being is to get these people into the government as employees as quickly as possible, and then to try to work with the department head to classify them in the proper position. And so the call was made by the Chief of Staff to change the position to make them qualify.
Okay. Gentlemen, does anybody have any questions on?
Could I say something?
Yes, sir.
The chief, I talked to chief staff, and they never bring to my attention not only that, but when the reason being why this is late, because it from HR told me that they need a chauffeur's license. That's why they disapprove. No, of all the people that have been working there for years, nobody had got a chauffeur's license. Nobody, since Mr. Pinko has those people. It's not required. And now, when I hire these people, I'm supposed to have a chauffeur's license. But all these people that's been working there for so many years, I got people here that's working for so many years, never a chauffeur's license. Now that I hired these three, I'm being penalized that they can be hired because they don't have a chauffeur's license. So that's, to me, that's, I don't think that is rational. We don't use anything higher than 5 times.
All right. We can be contentious about it, or we can figure out how are we going to fix this so that these guys ultimately are going to come out as cemetery workers where we want them, okay? Now, the fact that other people got hired without the chauffeur's license, that's water under the bridge. Senator Morrison. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Manglonia, the only other place or other agency that has a memorialized service under their agency is the Department of Parks and Recreation, and they still perform that service today, and they did have an arrangement with the Veterans Affairs Office. I'm not sure what the status is, but they were always able to assist the Veterans Affairs with burials at one point. Is there still some type of arrangement with the Department of Parks and Recreation?
Negative, but they borrow equipment, that's all. They use equipment.
Do you have a operator or operators from the department that assist with the backhaul burials?
No sense.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Addo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this goes way back to following up on Senator Morrison, is when the Veterans Affairs used to be operated by the Department of Parks and Recreation. So what it was is that probably the position description there that is noted is probably at the time when they were operated under Department of Parks and Recreation. So in order to, the individual that was qualified for that position needed a chauffeur's license because they did operate the backhoes. And those were the people that were working at the cemetery. Now, when the two cemeteries went separate ways, and the Veterans Administration handled the Veterans Cemetery, and Parks and Rec handled just the Nimitz Hill Cemetery. Probably what had happened is that they just copied the position description into their positions that they had at Veterans Cemetery, in assumption that they would purchase their own backhoes, they would purchase their own dump trucks for whatever reason that is needed down at the cemetery for cemetery operations. So, and I think that the chairman is correct in that updating the position descriptions will probably correct this position that's there now, where they don't need to have the chauffeur's license, and probably at a time until the cemetery actually purchases their own backhoe and heavy equipment that then would require the chauffeur's license for that position. Yeah, that's it.
To help the chairman, am I correct that Department of Administration has purview over rewriting or amending those classifications?
With the approval, yes.
So can you explain to the chairman how Mr. Minglonia can come to you to make the amendments to change that?
Yeah, he could have come to us and approved for as well to change the position.
What is it going to take for him to remove the chauffeur's license as a requirement?
That actually is under the position description. Maybe Shane, you can talk about the procedure.
The director can basically just submit a request, stating that they no longer have, used the backhoes or the dump trucks, and therefore the license is no longer necessary. And then we can remove it from there.
Janet did request for the amendment.
No, not for that.
But could that affect the pay structure of the position?
We'll take a look at it. I wouldn't be able to tell now, right, with that action, but we would take a look at it and, of course, advise any director how it would impact the position, their employees, and things like that before making any kind of final decisions on it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, they're going to have to be contracting out for the backhoe because they don't have any money to buy a backhoe. Okay.
Let me say one thing, Mr. Chairman. I went to see DOA back in February. I met with Anisha
July.
And all that time I went to BBMR, I asked for help. They never mentioned about anything because I don't know about all those requirements. I went to DOA, I went to BBMR, I see the chief of staff, I see the governor. What else? Nobody gave me any information.
All right. We're all here now. We're going to skin this cat. Okay? All right. Now, there was two people that also got sent in to be hired as clerks under the LTA provision. In the end, they came out as
Office aide?
office aides.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the pay apparently did not affect one of the individuals because he was I guess the office aide and the clerk. The salaries are the same, but the other individual was put in to be recruited as a clerk typist, which pays $19,000 a year, but was only approved for office aide at a rate of $17,700. So it's about $1,300 difference. Can you maybe speak a little bit as to what was the issue here? Now, both of these individuals went in as an LTA hire.
Correct. Both those individuals, for the clerk and clerk typist, there's testing that is required to qualify for the position. So the initial qualifications they met are the minimum qualifications, but they would have to take a test and be able to pass that test in order to be hired into the position. So our recruitment individual had brought that concern up to the front office, and basically the concern was if they were to take this test, would they qualify for the position? Because we didn't want to have another situation where they weren't deemed qualified and then we weren't able to get them in. And so we suggested that they be hired as an office aide so that we could get them in.
Okay. Sounds like a good option. But if the individual who was being hired as a clerk typist was willing to take that chance
Yes.
and felt that, hey, I can pass the clerk typist test, how long would he have had to wait to take that test? And was he given that option?
Yeah, I'm not sure. How long does it take us to schedule the test? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how long it takes us to schedule the test. Maybe we can just, 2 weeks. 2 hours? It's a 2-hour test? I just saw 2.
Yeah, 2-hour test, but how soon can you get him in?
The next day,
Okay.
after he takes the test? Yeah, sorry. That's my...
If that individual, I don't know if the individual is even given the option. Do you want to take this chance?
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly nothing to preclude us from processing, going forward. But again, the objective at the time that we were just trying to help these guys come in. I don't think it's any question that Mr. Manglutny has done a great job at the Veterans Affairs. His people, have certainly been instrumental in moving the department forward. So our mandate basically was to help him get these people in and have them start receiving a valid paycheck from the government of Guam.
Understand.
So maybe we took liberties in that respect, but there's nothing to preclude us from correcting it going forward.
So if that individual steps forward and says, I'll take your clerk typist test and I'll take my chances, can you have a shot at that?
Yeah, definitely, sir.
Okay. So it's up to you to ask the individual if he wants to take that gamble.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to leave it up to the new administration because Monday's my last day. I'm putting resignation in. It's not on the work related, but because of my health, because I have to go to physical therapy and speech therapy. So I discovered the government. Monday's my last day.
All right.
I'm allowed to speak.
My wife wants to.
Sure.
I'm on those. I don't mean to throw anyone under the bus, but I just want to say that when he took over, again, he was reported for duty. There was no paperwork. And on the strength of what the governor said, he went. And so when he went back to him and said, now I need help, he said, get them. That was the message. And so it wasn't from any malintent or, and coming from the Saipan end of things, you just do things and then everything else sort of falls into place. And so he followed the same template that was handed him. And that's part of the reason these guys worked, and they trusted him, and they would do anything for him. And they would do anything for the veterans. And the sad thing is the pound of flesh might ultimately come from all the veterans. And the veterans bring more than $70 million a year to the island of Guam. And we're going to choke on a chauffeur's license for these guys digging their graves.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Doc. But I like to be able to direct now based on.
Yeah.
Mr. Magnolia, when you were told to, given the approval, the authority to go ahead and move on things, were you given help? Did anybody help you to give you direction as to what the process? Are you familiar with the Guam process in as far as the hiring?
Let me tell you, when the government called me to help him because they got a lot of problems with the department down there. I asked BBMR, I asked DOA to help me because the situation here in Guam is very different I was Director of Immigration, Saipan, and Public Works. But we don't have all this red tape. You know, when you're told by the government to do a certain thing, the civil military, do it. And somebody along the line, my administrative officer, supposed to tell me on the paperwork, but it never happened. That's why I had to get rid of her. Because when I tell her to process GG1, it never did happen. Then I brought Miss Jan Mertita. Now she's working pretty good. I got a good team now. But in the past, I got a lot of problems down there. All those deadbeats that were working there, I get rid of them. Because sometimes they don't come to work. They make excuses, so I don't need those type of employee. So I got hired good people now. And they're veterans. I used to have a lot of clerks down there. I don't need clerks down there. I need veterans that work for the veterans.
Okay, Ms. Beleto, when the concern with regard to whether or not the individuals met the qualifications for the positions that were being requested, were those concerns brought to Mr. Manglonia?
On the cemetery workers, I'm not sure, but certainly with the other two positions that we had to change, Mr. Manglonia sent me a letter on April 6th requesting the above-step recruitment for these two individuals, and we did issue an official letter back on April 8th advising him why it's not permissible by law.
And I sent her the justification to hire those two people. My main concern is those cemetery workers, but the other two, I have no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question as to that again, these individuals did a great job, and they've certainly been helping Mr. Manglonia and supporting him as he's moved the department forward, but unfortunately LTAs cannot be hired above a step 1, and so that is why we could not process the GG1s as submitted.
Okay. My whole concern here was whether or not there was communications with Mr. Manglonia directly with regard to these concerns.
Yeah, was it cemetery workers? I'm not sure on the cemetery workers. I have to check. You wanna say?
Yeah, we were communicating with Miss Maritita at the time, because she was, of course, doing all the admin work for Mr. Manglonia. And so at that time, we were trying to work out. We knew that she was basically trying to do what she could to get it done, but we couldn't. We had to come back stating that minimum quals are the minimum quals. And so we did try to communicate as much as we could with both Veterans Affairs and later on Governor's Office. Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions before I move on? Okay. All right. So we've covered what we need to do to rectify the individuals who were initially hired to be cemetery workers, but at this point have to be hired as laborers to get them on board. And I think we've discussed what needs to be done to rectify that, to get them on board as cemetery workers. Then we discussed about the clerk, and that's going to be for the one individual. It's going to be his call as to whether he's willing to take, and you would give him that opportunity to take the clerk typist test to qualify for the clerk typist position, which has a pay difference of about $1,300. Now, there's two individuals that were requested to be hired, and that was the administrative officer to be hired under the LTA provisions at above step at K7, and then there was a planning technician at again above step H7. Now, what came back was that the individual, the administrative officer, could be hired at only step 1, and the planning tech could only be hired at H1 instead of H8, pay range H level 7. Can you maybe explain a little bit about how we might go about rectifying that? I know, so please go ahead.
Rectifying it. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so in the case of trying to hire above a step 1, there's a process that's required by 6205, which indicates that the justification needs to be submitted to the Department of Administration, and that justification is usually based on difficulty in finding a qualified candidate, as well as exceptional qualifications.
Right.
Once the position has been deemed as, requiring, or it's been justified to do above step, then it needs to be posted on the agency's website as well as our website for 10 days. And this is actually supposed to happen before an applicant is hired.
Okay. Now, in the documentation that I was able to receive from you and from the Veterans Affairs Office, the justification was submitted after, of course, the individual was hired. So, now, question again now is, okay, so the justification was turned in. Can we go back to first base and start all over?
No, I mean, 6303.1, transparency and disclosure says that any attempted creation of a position on an above-step recruitment not in compliance with 6205 is null and void. So therefore, if you already have a person occupying that position, and then you're not trying to hire them in an above step for that position, it's basically null and void. There has to be transparency in order to
Okay.
hire above step.
Okay. So I'm not sure if I understand. I mean, so they got hired now at step 1. They're on board.
Yes.
The director believes that these people have the qualifications to now be able to be hired at. So how can that be achieved, or can it?
Okay. The only way I think that could be achieved is if the department wanted to hire it in a classified position, basically recruit for it permanently. And at such time, of course, anyone, even current employees, would have to compete. And should they go through the whole merit system process and get offered the job, prior to that actual hiring into a permanent position, they would have to petition our department and go through all the steps of transparency to see if we can approve anything above step 1.
Okay.
So it's only at that point. At this point in time, because we're already in the LTA with the admin officer and things, we basically can't go backwards with it for the above step. But if they choose to go ahead and basically fill it permanently, at that point in time, that's when they could petition for the above step.
Okay.
Are both of these positions still LTA?
Yes, they came in at LTA, yes.
And in the event that they want to be classified, what happens if they don't meet the minimum qualifications for that position?
Yeah.
If they don't meet the minimum qualifications, it would be like the cemetery workers. We would not be able to qualify them, and therefore there is a chance that they would not get that position permanently.
Might they be terminated?
Well, if the position is moved to a classified and that LTA no longer exists, then the position doesn't exist and the person occupying it would no longer be employed. The only other way, Mr. Chairman, that I think perhaps could be considered, because I noticed when Mr. Manglotnia gave me sort of his listing of staff, One of the individuals was not under a planning technician one, but as a funeral director. So if a position was created as a different position and there were specific requirements that were needed, that would be a way that they could perhaps qualify that individual who's already doing the work to occupy a classified position in that position title.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I have a question. The three Guam Metro cemetery workers, one of the three that I hired made the qualification. He has a chauffeur license, and yet he is also given 19,000
As a laborer.
as a laborer, and he meets the qualification. He has a chauffeur license.
Was it submitted?
Right up there.
Yeah.
Stand up.
So just to clarify, an individual applying for a position must meet the minimum qualifications first and foremost before another special qualification is required. So if they did not deem him qualified based on the minimum qualifications, then the chauffeur's license wouldn't qualify him alone.
I understand, and I have not seen what was put on the application to communicate what kind of qualification or skills and experiences they have. So it's that goes back to what I said earlier, where maybe it needs to be rewritten to convey those experiences and skills that they do have.
I think the problem is the communication center. If they tell me from the get-go, because I asked for him, nobody tells me. And if they tell me these are the requirements, we could take corrective action up front.
Okay.
But I only knew Saturday night. Nobody communicated with me. Just Saturday night when they came to the house.
The individual
The
himself
individual.
told you.
Nothing from DOA. I never get any information from DOA.
All right.
I think with most departments' communications, it happens between our personnel department and the department's administrative personnel. When Mr. Manglotnia initiated a letter to me requesting for guidance or trying to justify the above step recruitment, that initiates a formal response from the director. But absent that, as Shane had mentioned, they were communicating with Ms. Maritita on the situation.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Yes.
Ms. Beleto, there's times where agencies place individuals in acting capacity. I know you can do that for an amount, I think twice, in an acting capacity after 90 days expires. With the LTAs, that could be, I think the time frames, as you stated, up to a year, right?
Yes.
Now, there's times where those cases happen where we place individuals in acting capacities so that therefore they could not only have the minimum qualifications but also meet the qualifications or the experience of being in that capacity, therefore having the ability to apply for that position once it's open or available. Can the LTA be treated the same way?
Because some of them occupied since December 2015, from the time that they occupied that position till March of 2016, that time frame doing those duties certainly would, count towards, whatever the qualification requirements are. But in the cemetery workers position, it requires 2 years doing that type of work. So that's why, even though they were occupying it for a little bit time, they still did not meet the minimum qualifications of 2 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anything else that you would like to add, Mr. Manglotnia?
I think this hearing will clear out some of the discrepancies. I think it's a miscommunication between the agency and the department. But I hope we have a better relationship in the future.
Well, I'm hoping that as a result of this, I think DOA has laid out some opportunities as to how we might be able to rectify some of the shortcomings. For example, getting those laborers up to cemetery worker status, the individual who was hired as an office aide to come in as a clerk typist if they're willing to take that chance. And I think with the planning technician and the ASO, that may take a little bit more creativeness, I guess. Did you have anything else that you might want to add?
No, I just, again, I was really sad to learn today that Mr. Manglotnia submitted his resignation. He's done a great job for the department, and, it's certainly a loss to the administration. So, we wish him well, and whoever fills his shoes has big shoes to fill.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead, and we have 3 individuals who did sign up. You've taken the time to come. I would like to go ahead and afford you the opportunity, and at least afford you, some time to go ahead and convey what it is that you want it to convey. So, Rodney, did you have anything that you wanted to say? You signed up. Just briefly. We have Jessica Maldonado. Okay. And I have Bill Cundiff. No? Okay. So, Mr. Cruz.
Holiday and good evening, Senator, Chairman, Vice Speaker, Senators. As we come here tonight amongst veterans in this issue that has raised amongst our community with the Veteran Affairs Office, and come to know the miscommunication or mishaps of what may take in steps, we only hope to see that there's better communication in the future that would prevent a catastrophe to happen like this. It's going to be a big loss for the veteran community again because of Mr. Manglotnia stepping down due to his health concerns. As we all know, in the past decade or so, that office has been in its worst position. To this date, what we know of it now is a work in progress office servicing the veteran community at its finest. To add to that, we can only hope that the position for the next administrator would come back to the legislature, and hopefully maybe there would be a change in the law to where the position is a confirmation to the legislature rather than being appointed, so that the next administrator doesn't have to take commands or orders as get it done, however which way it gets done, get it done. That there's a proper procedure, just like every autonomous agency that has to go through when they make the request for a change in their staff, a change in their budget, and change in their operation, so that there's clear continuity that the operation of each department is smooth as it can be. Right now, with what has been put forward by Mr. Manglotnia, senators, that came out of his personal pocket, was to ensure that veterans were being buried on time, to ensure that veterans were being serviced for their claims, to ensure that there was help there when there wasn't. I can only hope that the future lies brighter and that we learn from today as not just a body of government, but as a community, as one, and so that we can continue to successfully do the mission for our veterans on our island, and that the next administrator wouldn't have an issue in regards to communication of what needs to be done or the proper hiring, when that should be at the basics of an administrator's position and his right hand. And so it's very sad that we're here to witness Mr. Manglonia's departure, but we only hope that the next one would be better to fulfill those shoes that has been left behind. And that's all I have to leave, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Cruz. Thank you. And I just want to say before I close this hearing is that, again, I do want to recognize that I think certainly the veteran community has been better off because of the service that Sergeant Major Martin Manglonia was able to provide. And I think, as Mr. Cruz had indicated, your departure certainly will be noticed. And so with that, if there's no other comments, I'm going to go ahead then and we'll adjourn this oversight hearing. Thank you very much.